Good morning, everybody. My name is Faze Parker. I look after the go-to-market for Pivotal here at Europe, Middle East, and Africa. Pivotal is both a New Relic partner as well as a New Relic customer. We use New Relic internally to manage our own Pivotal Web Services, which is our managed cloud service, platform as a service that we offer to customers. What I want to talk about today is and the reason why Pivotal is here is because we're working with some of the largest organizations on the planet to help you to become more cloud native, right? We hear a lot about digital disruption. We hear about software-based companies which are born in the cloud, and how come they're able to do things with software that an established enterprise can only dream of, right? So today what we're going to be talking about is how you, as an existing company, whether you've been in business for 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, or 100 years or more, how you can adopt some of the same cloud-native best practices that the digital disruptors do, and what are some of the benefits of being able to do that. So just a little word on who is Pivotal before we get going. Pivotal was created in 2013 to really bridge this gap between what the digital disruptors are doing and what existing enterprises are able to do. And in that short period of time, we're already working with a third of the Fortune 100 companies around the world across different industries and different verticals, as you can see there. One of the things you might know us for is Spring. Anybody use Spring? Yeah, quite a few people. So Spring is the leading enterprise Java application development framework. And the reason why this statistic is meaningful is because it shows that the number of downloads per month of Spring Boot, which is the specific solution for developing microservices. So if you're developing microservices and you're doing it in Java, most likely you're going to be doing it with Spring Boot, which is one of the key offerings from Pivotal. But actually, our flagship offering, and the one that I'm going to be talking about a little bit today, is Pivotal Cloud Foundry, which is a cloud-native application platform for running microservices and 12-factor-based applications independently of whether it's on-premise or in the public cloud. And this statistic is meaningful because in the 3 years that we've been selling this product, it's the fastest-growing open-source product by revenue of any product that's ever been released and commercialized as open source. So that gives you an idea of the momentum behind Pivotal. And the reason why that's important is because the work that we do is all about helping you to transform into becoming a software company, helping you to become a cloud-native company. And our perspective on that is that digital disruption is fundamentally changing the way that business is done. We're hearing a lot today, even in the talks this morning, and you hear a lot more about that in the talks later today as well, about change, right? So change isn't just happening in the IT department. It's not just change in terms of the technologies and our working practices that we're using in IT, but the way that business is being done fundamentally is changing, right? If you think about your own personal life, when was the last time that you actually walked into a bank, right? For me, I can't remember the last time I walked into a bank, right? Certainly not in the last 6 months and not in the last year. So if you're a bank and you're relying on hiring happy, smiley customer service people to sit in a branch office to attract customers and do your cross-sell and upsell, and all of a sudden, your customers are not actually coming to the bank. They're transacting with you through your online presence or through your mobile presence. What does that do in terms of reshaping your customer acquisition strategy or your customer upsell opportunity? How are you going to drive new revenue streams? It means that whichever business you're in, you also now are in the software business. And this is another common theme that hopefully you're picking up on throughout the day. We're all hearing about these new digital disruptors, and they're being successful not through investing in real estate, not through investing in physical assets, right? If you think about what these companies are doing, Uber is the world's largest taxi company, and they don't own any vehicles, they don't hire any drivers. You think about Airbnb, the world's largest accommodation provider, and they don't own any real estate. What they're doing is developing software which intelligently matches supply and demand, right? And so their core strategic asset is not a physical building, it's not real estate, it's the software that they develop. Software is their competitive differentiator. And it's not just the software that they develop, but the way that they develop it and the way that they release that differentiates themselves. They do it much faster than established enterprises are able to do. And we're going to be looking at how you can do that as well. So when I say software, what do we mean, right? The software industry has been going for a while, but the key thing here to realize is that if your company is on a digital journey, if you want to deliver a better digital experience to your customers compared to your competitors, this isn't something that you can just go out and buy off the shelf, right? This is something, because if you can buy it off the shelf, then your competitors can buy it off the shelf and your experience isn't differentiated. So if you want to deliver a better digital experience compared to your competitors, it's something that you need to build. It's something that you need in-house skill and in-house competency on if you're going to use that as a competitive differentiator in the same way as some of those cloud-native software companies that we talked about. So when you think about how your customers are going to be interacting with you, right? If you're seeing this move from physical to digital, if you need to interact with your customers digitally and you want to deliver a better digital experience, what that means is that you need to build this competence in-house to become a leading software company. And many organizations that we speak to are kind of like, yeah, Netflix is doing all this great stuff and Amazon is doing all this great stuff and all these digital disruptors are doing all this great stuff. But we're held back by legacy. We do things in a particular way and we don't work in that way. How can we possibly compete against them? And that's really what I want to talk about this morning is how you can adopt some of those cloud-native best practices and compete more effectively against some of the digital disruptors. Adrian Cockcroft here is one of the original architects of Netflix, which is held up as one of the leading lights and one of the thought leaders around how to do modern software development. And he talks about what is the value of software, right? When does software have value, right? If you're a developer and you're writing code, when does that software actually deliver value to your company? It's only when it's actually being used by your customers, by your users, right? So we heard in the talk earlier from Chris, and he was talking about the delays and the latencies and the lags and the approval processes and change management boards that a lot of established enterprises are bogged down by in terms of getting software from a finished state. It's been tested, it's ready to go into production, and now you will actually get your users using it. And that is this gap or this time window that we're seeking to minimize, right? Because the quicker you can do that, it means the quicker you can get innovation to market faster, quicker you can attract more customers or unlock new business models or release new features, right? So the way that these cloud-native companies are able to do that, and Chris touched a little bit on this earlier on, is a fundamentally different way, both in terms of the way that they architect software as well as in the process that they use for developing and delivering and releasing software as well. So rather than do waterfall-based software development where you do basically a sequential process, you do all your, you write a 50 or 100-page requirements document and then you hand it off to somebody to design the software and somebody to implement it and somebody to test it. And then a year or 18 months down the road, you find that what's actually been implemented may not have been accurate against the original requirements. Or worse, your requirements in that time window may have actually changed, right? So agile software development is all about taking smaller steps, right? And Chris talked about this earlier, making small changes more frequently as opposed to making bigger changes less frequently. In order to do that, there's also new architectural patterns which the cloud-native organizations use, which are based around microservices, which are based around 12-factor applications. So if you check out, for example, 12factor.net, you'll find a set of best practices on how to develop cloud-native applications, what you should and shouldn't do in order to write applications that run well in the cloud. And the whole idea behind doing this is, if somebody has an idea for a feature in the morning, that you're able to release that into production in the afternoon or in the evening. Now, how many organizations are able to do that today? Most organizations that have been around for some number of years are prevented from being able to operate at that level of agility because they just don't have the processes and the tooling and the ways of working to support that. So what we're seeing is this change not just in the cloud-native companies, but also established organizations that have been around for a while, in how things are done with regard to application development and delivery. So I talked earlier about the shift in architectural patterns, right? Moving from one monolithic blob of code, which does everything which your application needs to do, into a more modular approach where the application is decomposed into smaller modules or microservices, which you can scale independently, which you can have smaller teams working on different microservices, and each microservice is self-contained. And what that means is that you can update those microservices a lot more frequently without having to worry about how that's going to impact the rest of your application. We also see a move from waterfall-based software development to a more agile approach, is more iterative, where you release a minimum viable product into production, you get your users using it, you collect their feedback, either by asking them or by including metrics, and this is where the partnership with New Relic really comes into play, right, to collect these metrics about how your users are using the applications, right, and helping you decide what you should be doing next, because you want to use that feedback to prioritize what are the changes that you need to make to your existing code base to maybe optimize it or make it better, or what new features or new capabilities you want to add. Right? And that's the faster you can go down that loop of releasing software, getting it into production, getting feedback, taking that impact to prioritize what new features you add, releasing those, getting feedback. The faster and faster you can go around that, the faster you can bring innovation to market compared to your competitors. We've also heard a lot this morning about the change from static infrastructure to dynamic infrastructure. And actually, I'd move that up a level and talk about, the importance of infrastructure is diminishing. Most organizations now see the value that they are delivering to their customers being delivered through the applications that you develop, the digital experiences that you provide. And of course, you need physical infrastructure, you need virtual infrastructure, you need cloud infrastructure in order to be able to deliver those applications. But the focus should be on making sure that your expensive developers and your expensive operations teams are focused on the application, because that's what delivers the experience rather than the underlying infrastructure. So we're moving away from static, snowflake-based, siloed infrastructure for specific applications to a more cloud-based approach where applications are dictating what the infrastructure requirements are rather than the other way around. We're moving from application releases 2 or 3 times a year, which is what most organizations are able to do today, to a much more fluid way of releasing software into production, even multiple times per day or multiple times per hour, and as some of the cloud-native organizations are able to do, even as frequently as 11 seconds in the case of Amazon Retail. And then finally, it's not just about getting your software into production, but also how do you manage the ongoing operations of these complex distributed applications? Because now you've got not just one monolithic application to manage and monitor the health of, you've got a distributed environment. You've got maybe dozens of microservices where you had one application before. And now you may have tens or even hundreds of instances of each microservice type, right? So you're looking at a very large mess, yeah, maybe that was a bit of a slip of the tongue, a very large mesh of microservices which need to interact, which need to work together. So how do you identify where you've got health issues? Where do you identify where you've got performance problems? Where do you identify the areas for improvement? And that's really where Pivotal and New Relic are working together to give you that visibility into the whole stack. So really what we're seeing is if you want to become a modern software company, there's 2 things that you need to do really, really well, right? One is actually not a technology thing. Yeah, technology, we'll get onto that in a minute. But actually, it's about changing the way that you work. It's about changing your working practices, changing your behavior, changing the expectations that people have. And this whole kind of people, process, and cultural transformation is actually the more difficult part of it, right? The technology transformation is actually the easy part. It's easy, relatively, to pick up new technologies, such as platform as a service, such as microservices, these new architectural patterns. What's more difficult is how do you change your working practices to take advantage of these new ways of working? And one way that you can do that is by taking on board some of the same practices which the cloud-native organizations do. So things like agile software development, which I mentioned, so moving away from waterfall-based software development to more iterative approaches. So things like test-driven development, right, where you actually write your code, you write your test before you actually write your code, and that means that the testing can be automated. Things like pair programming, where you've got two people working on two keyboards and two screens, but with one computer. So they're actually doing the same work at the same time, right? And that means that they can come up with more creative ideas. They can avoid bugs from being introduced into the code. They can write higher quality of code and improve their productivity. Extreme programming, continuous delivery, DevOps, right? These are all buzzwords, but they're all things which are relating to changing the way that we work rather than specifically the technologies that we work with. And this combination of processes and tools means that you're more optimized for change. It's all about being able to make changes quicker so that change is a trivial thing, right? Whereas, when you look at most established enterprises, the big thing that most enterprises are stuck with is change is bad, right? Change is something that we should minimize. We shouldn't change things because change introduces risk of instability. Whereas when you look at a cloud-native organization that's born in the cloud, their attitude to change is completely different, right? Their view is that change is something that you should embrace. The faster you change things, the faster you're able to change things. If you're good at making change, that actually reduces risk. It doesn't introduce risk, it reduces risk. And that's one of the key things I think that a lot of organizations struggle to get their head around as they try and compete against these digital disruptors. So Pivotal offers something called Pivotal Labs, which is a services engagement, which is all about building your in-house expertise around these working practices, around these tools, around some of these methodologies that I talked about. But in addition to that, you also need a platform, right? So we talked about the move from static infrastructure to more dynamic infrastructure. And actually, if you up-level that discussion a little bit, the focus of the platform should be to provide everything that your application needs in order to work well. And that doesn't mean just providing VMs and just providing containers and automating and orchestrating that. But it's about providing the complete set of functionality which your application needs. So whether it's health management, whether it's load balancing, whether it's log aggregation, whether it's integration with tooling from New Relic. So you have a complete environment in which to run your application. And that means that you can focus your developers and your operators on the stuff that really matters to you, which is your application code, rather than all the rest of the stack, which actually doesn't deliver a lot of value to your business, right? So what Pivotal Cloud Foundry does, which is the platform that we offer, it allows you to develop and run cloud-native applications independent of what the underlying cloud is. So you can run your application unmodified on AWS, on Google Compute Platform, on Microsoft Azure, as well as on-premise options as well. And that avoids cloud vendor lock-in. It allows you the ability to focus your developers on the stuff which is above the value line, the stuff that differentiates you, which is your application. Let the platform take care of manage the infrastructure and the containers and the VMs. So that has benefits both on the development side, because the experience that you have is a developer self-service one. So whereas we heard earlier on about some of the challenges of going through approval processes and the delays and latencies that can cause because you're relying on other people to do things for you, to provide you with infrastructure, to provide you with virtual machines and containers and middleware and databases and message queues before you can deploy your application into production. With this environment, the platform takes care of all of that for you. You choose your application, you point it at the platform does take care of everything else. It takes care of provisioning the infrastructure, the operating systems, the middleware, et cetera. And that means that you can focus on your application rather than the rest of the plumbing. There's a broad ecosystem. For this to work, there's a broad ecosystem of partners that we work with, from APM vendors like New Relic to logging and metrics, databases, message queuing, mobile applications, DevOps tooling. All of this integrates into this platform. So choose your favorite tooling, integrate it into the platform, and develop your applications on a platform that's enabled you to focus on the stuff that differentiates you rather than the stitching together all of these different components. We heard earlier on from the keynote presentation about New Relic's focus on full stack visibility. So the integration that we have with New Relic actually extends down into the Pivotal Cloud Foundry environment as well. So managing the capacity of the environment, managing the applications, and the health of those things are all integrated, and you can do that through a single user interface. Scaling your application for big days, right? So we heard about retail use cases and Black Fridays and promotions and sales. The platform supports that by auto-scaling your application. You don't have to worry about scaling your application for bursts and peaks. The platform takes care to make sure that your application spins up additional instances when it's busy and spins down those instances when it's not required anymore. And then the real-time analytics that we talked about, again, is really important when you're doing iterative development. So the integration with New Relic there basically exposes those metrics so that you can decide what changes you need to make to your code base to improve it, or what new features and functions you need to add. This is just an example of the service map which we saw earlier on. And what I particularly like about this is that this is out-of-the-box functionality. New Relic goes out and it looks at your cloud-native application architecture. It discovers all the microservices. It makes the connections and the dependencies between these microservices. You don't have to manually sit there and draw that in a Visio style. It happens for you automatically. And that gives you a very simplified way of managing the complex distributed applications that we're developing with these microservice types approaches. And then I mentioned also the integration on the Cloud Foundry side in terms of the platform on which you're running these applications. And here also, the integration with New Relic gives you the ability to do capacity planning on the platform to make sure that you have enough capacity, that you have enough VMs and enough storage, et cetera, to be able to run your application workloads. Because it's not just one application you're going to be running on the platform. It's potentially going to be multiple applications, multiple microservices, multiple instances of those microservices. So making sure that the platform is able to foresee your requirements into the future as well is an important part of the integration that we provide. And then the final point I want to talk about is, we've been talking about cloud-native applications, and i.e. new applications that you may be developing. But what about the existing applications that you may already have, right? Some of those applications may well warrant refactoring to run in a 12-factor kind of way. Some of those applications you may want to lift and shift and run on the cloud. But how do you make sure that you're going to get a good experience by doing that? And again, the integration there with New Relic gives you a before and after snapshot, right? So you can see how your application is running at the moment. Maybe it's monolithic, maybe it's running on-premise. And now you want to refactor it. You want to run it on Pivotal Cloud Foundry, on your choice of public cloud. And what New Relic gives you is the ability to compare the after scenario versus the before scenario to make sure that actually you're making improvements by making that migration. So the key takeaways that I want to leave you with is that being able to deliver business innovation through software is something that's important, whether you're a retailer, whether you're a banker, whether you're an insurer, whether you're a manufacturer. That's a core competency regardless of which industry you're in. And you don't have to be a Silicon Valley startup company in order to do this well. You just need to take on board some of the same best practices that we've been talking about today, both from a technical architectural point of view and a platform point of view, and a process point of view as well. And that process transformation, that people transformation is actually the most challenging part. And then the final thing, the digital experience is your brand experience. So as you become more and more digital in how you interact with your customers, it's really important to be able to deliver not just compelling functionality and personalized features, but also a great, easy and smooth user experience as well. And the integration and some of the work that I've touched on that we're doing with New Relic definitely helps you with that. So for more information, stop by the Pivotal booth, and you'll be able to pick up loads of books that we've written on all of these topics. And we're also doing a joint roadshow with Google and with New Relic The London event is on May the 31st here in Old Street, a couple of stops away from here. And that's where you'll get to learn all best practices around how do you develop cloud-native applications and microservices and 12-factor. How do you take advantage of Spring Boot and Pivotal Cloud Foundry and the integration with New Relic? So I'd like to invite you, as a follow-up to today, to sign up for that event. And the URL's there on the screen. Or do come along to the Pivotal booth, and we'll tell you more about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.